We are very much interested in the research that you people are coming to share. So I will not spend a lot of your time. I'll just put my remarks in three main areas. A slight background just to give you a little information about what is happening. And of course, working in financial stability is under the supervision function. We are regulators. So for me, research is important because it helps me to conduct oversight in an informed way. The research results can be used by us to I think, maybe improve on regulation. That's what we think. We may be wrong, we may be right, but that's what we think. That's why we think there are benefits for research if it's well done. Then I'll conclude. So briefly, that's the summary of what I intend to discuss with you. So quickly, if we take, even within the regional context, why are we interested in issues of deepening and inclusion? The story is simple. It's simply because we are concerned, although there are improvements in deepening, measured, for example, by the extent to which the financial sector is extending credit to the private sector has been improving, it is still low. The story in Kenya is a little bit much better than is happening in Uganda and Tanzania. So we need a lot of improvements in the area of financial, the rate at which the financial sector is extending credit. In the most developed countries now, credit is very close to 100% of GDP over. In Uganda, we're talking about 15%. So there is a very big gap to improve credit extension. The same story goes with inclusion. I think the studies that we are seeing now attest to the benefits that inclusion can derive. Maybe it is what is explaining why credit is still very low. So we need to move in these two areas. The story is similar in the context of again financial access, and the role of informal sector is still quite significant. Essentially because for a number of African countries, and Uganda included, access is still a problem. And policy must be seen to be responding to this in order to increase access. And policy can only be useful if research helps to feed into the process to inform it. And that's why I'm excited about the work that's currently going on from work by yourselves. The coverage of mobile phones has helped to extend access to financial services. So this is likely to be an important channel for savings and payments. Essentially because it is attacking one area dealing with the transaction costs. And I know this is one of the areas that you're dealing with in your researches. So there is a lot of potential in this kind of payment system channel. And my colleague has already alluded to the impact of mobile money transactions. These charts are a bit misleading because they are looking at it at the monthly level, but on an annualized basis, the value of mobile transactions has increased, as my colleague, as at end March, we were talking about over 13.4 trillion. If you remember the number of the budget, that tells you something about what is going on. The same, the graphs again give you the same story. Even transactions per customer are also increasing. So we are back to the issue of that I indicated that is important for us, that we have to deal with. The issue of how do you balance the risks that a payment system might bring, and also the need to improve efficiency through which this is done. And we're always having a lot of issues. On the one hand, there are a number of people who tend to emphasize the risks. That are brought by the technology, while others tend to emphasize the advantages. But from the regulatory perspective, we know that all payment systems will have issues to do with risks, whether they be operational, whether they are related to solvency, and so on. Most payment systems will have these risks. The question is, how do you, as a regulator, mitigate these risks? So these are the kind of things that we have to deal with. That's one plane of it. But on the other side, always, is the fact that technology tends to be faster than the way at which we regulators work. So sometimes we respond with fairly significant lag. But the important point is, when we finally do, how are we responding to make sure that these systems that we use are helpful? So, as I say, the important thing is there are innovations. We need to encourage the good out of these innovations, but most importantly, the people they are serving, we must do a lot to mitigate the risks to the customers at an individual level, but most importantly also to the stability of the financial system as a whole. But we also know that there are a number of synergies between innovation, inclusion, and financial stability. But this is again where research is very important to help us unravel what are these synergies, and in so doing, you'll be helping us to inform the oversight process. You'll be helping us to improve on how we conduct oversight. Bank of Uganda has been interested in the area of financial inclusion in doing its oversight role again. And we have designed a project that deals with access, it deals with issues of literacy, consumer protection, and of course, picking out the issues to do with data. Again, this project can benefit very much from research activities such as this one in developing what enhancement we need to improve the project that we're undertaking. As you might be aware, we're also dealing with the regulatory process at two levels. The first is the National Payment Systems Law. And the other one is guidelines that we issue. Some of these guidelines deal with things like interoperability, system standards, again, issues of competition and consumer protection. Even in issuing guidelines or in effective new regulations such as the National Payment Systems Law, research and information from experiences in other countries is useful in helping us design good laws, in helping us design systems that are robust as we move forward. I will select two areas that we think oversight, this is the second area that we think is important in the case of Uganda and for you people in the research, in terms of generating gender-sensitive measures of financial inclusion. We know that women's groups, women generally, have performed rather poorly with respect to inclusion. Whatever measures you use, whether you take those who are served by financial institutions, women return poor scores. whether they are using the new platforms as we are talking about mobile money, receiving or sending money, or saving at financial institutions, the metrics for women are still poor. So, to me, how is research going to be helpful, especially in the Ugandan context? Is in identification of what are the demand and supply side barriers that are binding. How important, for instance, is suitable collateral, or the issue of financial literacy in the Ugandan context. Even when you look at the supply side, how important is the issue of availability of suitable financial products for women? What data do we have about creditworthiness for female borrowers within the Ugandan financial system? This kind of information, I think, is useful for informing us and also improving the regulatory process. Even when it comes to policy response, there are a number of areas that we might be interested. For example, in identification of what are these discriminatory legal provisions that we need to change. How best can the Bank of Uganda, the Uganda Bureau of Statistics and the EPRC, for example, invest to generate more extensive gender disaggregated data? This is useful information to inform the process of oversight. Even in terms of financing models, how can the government of Uganda expand financing to women-led SMEs for smallholder women and farmers, benefiting from work that has been done in other countries in Africa or in other parts of the world. So this to us is useful to inform the work at the Bank of Uganda. That's why I'm very happy by what Jeff mentioned. Jeff talked about randomized control trials. And I want to add my voice to what he was saying, that this could be useful to help expand our knowledge, to test the policies that we have on the ground, to help give us more evidence about causality, to help give us more evidence that is useful in terms of informing the regulatory process. If we do not have evidence, I think the quality of regulation suffers. So I think this research format that you bring is good for us. And I would like to encourage you that even at the Bank of Uganda, we're also interested in this kind of research, and we have technical officers who might be interested to partner with you in some of these areas, because we know that research is beneficial. It helps us test the effectiveness of products. Even programs and policies. If we do not test the effectiveness, we probably leave something that should have been changed 2 years ago to continue for the next decade. And the economy as a whole suffers as a result. So I think that's why studies such as evaluating the evidence, the efficacy of school-based financial education programs are useful for us, because we are trying to pilot a similar thing in Uganda, using secondary schools, for example. So this can help us to understand which programs are most useful and how best can we tailor these to be more effective. Of course, also to improve the habits of our people in handling finance. I'm informed that there is good work which has been done in a number of countries, Bolivia, Philippines, and Peru, looking at how to increase savings. This is very important for Uganda. To improve the first graph that I did on credit intermediation, savings must go so that banks can intermediate this credit. We have a regulatory limit that limits banks to lend up to 80% of deposits. As I speak, most of the banks are already between 70 and 75%. So how do you increase credit? You need to increase the deposits. You need to increase savings. So if you increase the savings habits, you're actually helping the credit creation process. So it's important for research to establish causal links between innovations and impacts that might be observed. And I'm very interested in the area of mobile money. A number of people who have been visiting us have been pointing out only the negative aspects of mobile money. Simply because the innovation is so simple. And because it's so simple, a number of people think it's very risky. But we think it's a good innovation. It has increased the number of people with access to some payment instrument over and above the 5 million people who hold accounts in the banking system. The number of mobile money users is now much more than the number of people who hold accounts in the banking system. So we must benefit from that kind of technology to see how to increase the linkages between that technology and the banking system. So to conclude very quickly, there are a number of innovations such as mobile-based finance that are of interest to both markets and to us in the area of policy. But the important question for me is how can we make these benefits more long-lasting? How can we make these benefits useful to the people in a more long-lasting way? Again, we've been talking about the issue of financial literacy and inclusion. The question is, how do we make the campaign for financial inclusion and literacy more effective? For example, by using what we are seeing from the gender angle, getting more information about gender access, for example, how can we use this dimension to make this more useful? Again, the area of research is important. We've talked about market development and regulatory policy. Evidence, of course, is important in indicating this interface, that these things might interact for our benefit. So I take this opportunity again to wish IPA, all the researchers present here, Economic Policy Research Center, all the best in your discussions. I will be joining some of the areas of interest as I've indicated. My interest is in the area of mobile money, so I'll be joining in the discussions in those areas. And I think we will all take away important insights from the studies and the discussions that follow. Thank you very much.